Is Microsoft ripping off small defense contractors? Are they ripping off the defense department? Satya, if you're listening to this, please reach out. Right? Let me know why this is higher. I would like to tell my customers because they're wondering why they're having to pay so much more money. Do you need Microsoft GCC High for CMMC? The answer, but it is possible for you to stay with the system you have and still achieve ITAR compliance. Well, hopefully we can shed some light on this and give you a kind of unbiased opinion. Those who sell Microsoft GCC High, those are the only tools they use. And as the old saying goes, to a hammer, everything is a nail. So whatever you're using, whatever security tools, endpoint protection tools you're using, we evaluate those and we then actually can tell you if they meet requirements or not. So instead of forcing things on you. Hello. Today we're going to answer one of the most important and one of the most common questions we hear from customers and from the industry. Do you need Microsoft GCC High to achieve CMMC Level 2 or CUI compliance? But first, let's find out who actually needs to even achieve CMMC Level 2 or CUI compliance. So if you are any one of this, then probably CMMC Level 2 compliance applies to you. If you handle CUI, controlled unclassified information, so be it transmitting, storing, processing CUI, or if you handle ITAR assets, so anything that's controlled by export regulations, especially in the arms regulations, or if you're a DoD prime or a subcontractor, bare minimum, you're handling CMMC Level 1, which is required for FCI, Federal Contract Information. But in most cases, you're probably handling CMMC Level 2. Or if you have received an award from Health and Human Services Department, Department of Energy, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, or one of the other many departments from the federal or state governments where you might see the following DFARS 252.204/7012 or FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulations 52.204-21, or even NIST 800-171. I know this is a mouthful, but trust me, if you see any of this fun sequence of letters in your contract or numbers, you have to take this seriously. It means you have to comply with these requirements. Now, who else would be required? Now, if you suddenly received an SBIR or STTR grant, congratulations, by the way, this will likely apply to you as well, especially if you're phase 2. Look in your contract. It really doesn't matter which department you got this. It could be from NASA, it could be from Department of Energy, it could be from DoD. That is not important. If you look for those regulations for DFARS or FAR regulations, then this requirement probably applies to you. All right, now you know who this applies to, but let's first and foremost hear this from Microsoft. What does Microsoft has to say about if you need to buy Microsoft GCC High in order to achieve CMMC or CUI protections? Well, interestingly enough, Microsoft is not that forthcoming. There's no clear guidance. If you pull up your favorite search engine, Google, Bing, or ChatGPT or Gemini, and you search, you will see there's really no clear information from Microsoft if GCC High is necessary for achieving CMMC compliance if you are running on Microsoft Commercial or even in other services like Google Cloud, if you need to actually migrate over to Microsoft GCC High. Interestingly enough, the only piece of content that we find is from a blog post from a Microsoft staffer. No specific guidance, but an opinion blog that it's helpful in describing this, but it's really not specific product guidance on how to achieve this. So the blog I'm referring to is from Richard Wakeman, who is a chief architect. And he has a blog post that he posted in 2024 in September, about a year ago, and revised it this summer in July of 2025. It's nearly 9,000 words of detailed specifications, which go beyond CMMC. They address actually DoD and secret offerings, which is beyond the minimum requirement of CMMC compliance for CUI protection. There's a lot of information in here if you want to sit here and read through this. But interestingly enough, this is the only piece of information that you'll find from Microsoft that provides any relevant guidance. This is the only article or only blog post referenced by many consultants out there. But let's take a look at what it says, right? We're going to simplify this, but let's see why this actually creates more confusion than it solves. First and foremost, it first says that FedRAMP in Azure. So Azure, or I should say Azure and FedRAMP, which is one of the Microsoft's key products, Azure, the other one being Microsoft 365 or Office 365. It's one of the key offerings. Out of the gate, Microsoft says that Azure commercial or government, we're going to define those terms in a minute. Meaning Azure, if you just go from the website or buy it, or if you buy it as a government or a government contractor, out of the gate, either of this, Azure Commercial or Government, are FedRAMP High authorized, meaning the Program Management Office from FedRAMP has approved it and given them the vote of approval for authorization to operate. Now, the other piece for Microsoft 365, aka Office 365, there's less clear guidance. But Richard does give his opinion over here on what he thinks should be done. So let's take a look at this. Let's kind of dig in there and find out what's specifically going on over here. When it comes to CUI protections for FedRAMP in Office 365, he recommends a high watermark. So let me see. This is so long. I have read this multiple times, and I'm still getting lost in this, looking for this. So let's go ahead. Let's look for this together. All right, here we go. It says the way I frame this, as customers asks, he's speaking personally, right? Your higher watermark for compliance to gain coverage is CUI is in alignment with controls above and beyond FedRAMP. Okay. So what is he talking about? So if you are dealing with CJIS, which is Criminal Justice Information Systems from FBI, which every state that accesses the Criminal Justice Information System has to implement the standard. Or if you are dealing with IRS, Internal Revenue Services, so get ready. Taxes are coming up soon in another 4 months, which is IRS 1075 regulation, then you have to deal with this as well. If you are working with the U.S. Defense or the military, Defense Department or military, and you're handling ITAR or EAR, which are both like arms control and export control systems, then that's your high watermark. So there's some confusion. So he's saying, you should go higher than the minimum requirements. And he gives his opinion, right? He talks about, in my opinion, what to do. But again, Richard is a great guy. We'll love to have him on the show. Richard, if you're watching, please hit me up and we can do some clarification podcast for everybody to have a better view of what's important. But for now, right, as a chief architect over here, this is the only guidance we have from Microsoft. And again, it's an opinion, highly educated. And moreover, right, Richard is talking about just with Microsoft. He's not talking about configuration of Microsoft commercial or other systems. And if they would comply, there is no clear definition. So it's sticking with a very narrow limit. Now, aside from that, what else do we have from Microsoft, right? We have a little bit of a confusing at best and worst case, potentially misleading requirement that they've put out there saying you have to be on US sovereign cloud, right? So what is US sovereign cloud? It is a completely made up marketing term. So US sovereign cloud is not a federal or a DoD requirement. It is something that Microsoft came up with to provide some guidance. And we'll talk about what that means. It's a purely marketing term. Microsoft, Oracle, and other vendors use it. Sometimes they call it GovCloud or other things, but there is no requirement in the default. The language is not used anywhere for CMMC requirements to say you have to be on US sovereign cloud. There's very specific requirements. So we're going to touch in a second. Fourth, misaligned incentives. So what do I mean by that? Misaligned incentives. So keep in mind, Microsoft will make 10 times more money if you migrate from commercial Microsoft standard to Microsoft GCC High and buy like the lowest possible plan, which is the E3 plan. So you can go from paying $6 or $4 a month to as much as 10 times more because Microsoft standard, Office 365 standard is not even available in GCC High. So you have to go to E3. So there's a misaligned incentive. They're going to make a lot more money if you simply migrate, right? So would I trust the opinion of someone who has a financial gain to tell me which direction to go? Maybe, right? So not to put this, cast any shade on Microsoft. They're a great company. If you haven't bought the stock yet, maybe considering it. By the way, this is not any financial advice, my own personal opinion, but they have a lot to gain. Now, on the lower end, if it's apples to apples, if you're going from E3 Enterprise 3 plan to something equivalent, it's not 10 times X, but it's still almost 2 times more expensive potentially. If you can't really get a clear answer from Microsoft, if you need GCC High, so where can we get a clear answer from? Well, hopefully we can shed some light on this and give you a kind of unbiased opinion of what's going on. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and jump into this beautiful table that I've put together for you. I've broken this down into 4 columns to really define the different set of capabilities available to you to use. This is we're only talking about the Microsoft universe. We're not talking about Google Workspace or any Oracle or GoDaddy, any of those. We're going to touch on those in a little bit, but let's just talk about the Microsoft universe for now. So you have 4 types of offerings. So you have Microsoft Commercial, you have Microsoft GCC, Microsoft 365 GCC, you have Microsoft 365 GCC High, and I put this over here as well, Microsoft self-hosted. Let's talk about each of this. Microsoft Commercial is the system you can buy today. If you go to Microsoft.com, go to plans, and click on purchase. It doesn't say commercial on it. That's just the default name, but Microsoft 365 Commercial out of the gate is what you buy. GCC stands for Government Community Cloud. That is typically reserved for federal, state, local, and tribe contractors. This could be, if you're working with them, you can be approved to purchase this. GCC High, on the other hand, it is similar to GCC, except it has a higher bar, higher requirement. Originally, this was aligned with FedRAMP high authorization versus the FedRAMP moderate authorization. So that's actually is changing, but the name has stuck. So we call it Government Community Cloud High. And the self-hosted, obviously, is if you're buying the licenses yourself, right? Microsoft is still selling those licenses and you deploy it, then that's called self-hosted. Self-hosted, obviously, so the mission owner, to use the DoD language, if you're deploying it on your environment or the environment managed and controlled by you, which doesn't have to be your physical servers. So let's take a look at this 4 options. And before we can actually dive in, I'm going to touch on eligibility, region, supporting staff, and FedRAMP before we hit on what the requirements are actually addressed. So eligibility, region, and supporting staff. So eligibility, meaning who can buy it. So anyone can buy this, right? Go ahead and commercial, you can buy it today. GCC could be purchased by any government entity, state, local, federal, or if you're a contractor, you can purchase for them. Fairly similar to GCC High as well. There's a little bit more stringent requirements in screening for this. Obviously, self-hosted, if you bought the license, you can install it. The only requirement is pay up and get the license and you're good to go. Region. So this is key. This is actually a key component. It's part of the requirements for DFARS where you can deploy it. It has to be in US. Now, commercial out of the gate, when you buy it and you happen to be in US, it'll deploy in US, but you have to also explicitly mark it to say, hey, I want you committed to keeping my environment in the US continental region. Of course, you can also choose to be anywhere else you like, India, Indonesia. You can do it by region or you can do it by country, right? Southeast Asia. Now, whereas with GCC and GCC High, those are committed to continental US only. So regions within that, that's the only options you have. Now, your location, obviously, for self-hosted is wherever you decide to run, which we strongly recommend you run this on continental US environment to meet the bar for that. Okay, supporting staff. So why is this important? Because many of these regulations, DFARS, in some areas require US personnel, but not all of them. And we're going to touch on that. Obviously, commercial, Microsoft doesn't commit to having their US staff only, so they can have international staff working on your system. So it could be any of their international offices from Europe to East Asia, to India, to Australia. There's no commitment on which staff will be responsible for maintaining and managing. Now, for yourself, of course, you have to also have a shared responsibility. You have staff as well, but this is just talking about supporting staff from Microsoft only. Now, the Microsoft GCC, same thing. Again, global workforce, there's no commitment, but GCC High gives you the commitment of US persons only. Now, they're all actually screened. They're all the staff. Doesn't matter if it's global or US, but the screening requirements apply. Now, as for self-hosted, again, it's your team. You have the obligation and the duty to run this. So those 3, the region, we'll talk about the third one, FedRAMP, but those 2, region and supporting staff, are the key components of this. Now, let's take a look at the FedRAMP. FedRAMP compliance has to do with the requirements. So this is the standard, either moderate or high authorization or equivalency that the federal government insists if you're going to be selling, hosting anything in the cloud, that they have to be FedRAMP compliant. Now, Microsoft Commercial, even though they technically meet the requirements, they actually are not, don't have the full authorization. Whereas GCC, Government Community Cloud, is moderate authorized, and high equivalency. So in 2023, Department of Defense released a letter saying that if you technically implement it and provide a body of evidence, BOE, then you can be considered as moderate or high equivalence. Now, whereas GCC High, it's high authorized. That's where the name comes from. This doesn't apply to self-hosted because this FedRAMP is only for cloud computing. So let's take a look at this too. If you go to the fedramp.gov, which I'm going to visit there right now, and then click on Marketplace and scroll down and click on Products, and then type Microsoft in here and click Enter to search and scroll down. Actually, it returns pretty much, the search is not working well. It returns every company, but you'll see over here, Microsoft has 4 offerings in the marketplace. Azure, so Azure Government, and also their sister offering, Azure Commercial Cloud. These are the same offerings. They're both high authorized. So FedRAMP high authorized for both of them. So that's great. Now the other products, Microsoft 365 GCC. So this is Government Community Cloud. That's GCC. It's moderate authorized, as I just showed you. Whereas the GCC High, Government Community Cloud, I don't know why they spelled it out over here. Well, they kept the acronym over here, but this is the GCC High, and that is high authorized. So high FedRAMP authorization. So that's a higher bar. Now, for CMMC compliance, it's important to know you are not required to have high authorization. You actually need moderate equivalency or moderate authorized. You'll notice on this list that equivalency is not mentioned. So the federal marketplace does not list equivalency. That is actually something that the vendor does on its own. And you as a customer have to request the body of evidence, a BOE, and you have responsibility in managing that. It's a higher bar for you, higher responsibility for you to maintain that. All right. So let's go ahead. Let's continue with this. Now that we kind of have what comes with it, let's kind of dive in and look what it actually addresses. By the way, before we go any further, so this continental US persons only and high authorization is what Microsoft has labeled as US sovereign cloud. That is not a technical term. It's a pure marketing term, US sovereign cloud. The language used is U.S. persons in the regulations. It's U.S. persons, FedRAMP high authorization, and the geography of it, which is continental U.S., its constituent states, and actually limits some territories, so it can't be territories. It has to be continental U.S., which includes all the states. So that's the language it used. So don't confuse it with U.S. sovereign cloud. As you can see over here, the other ones, Microsoft GCC and commercial doesn't label as U.S. sovereign cloud, but at the same time as we're going to go through this, the quote-unquote non-U.S. sovereign cloud is still able to achieve compliance with a lot of these regulations. So DFARS 252.204-7012. Can you achieve compliance using Microsoft Commercial? The answer is yes, it's possible. Not out of the box. You have to do some configuration to get to compliance. Now, GCC and GCC High, you can achieve that. You still have a lot of responsibilities. Same with the Microsoft self-hosted. You still have to meet all of the other control requirements for CMMC level 2 to be considered compliant. So this is out of the box possible. Same with this, with additional configuration and some tools, commercial can be achieved compliancy with CMMC. We're going to talk about this in just a few minutes, how to do that. But the same applies with the FAR. So these are kind of basically the FAR 52204 and the DFAR. They're like the sister regulations of FAR federal acquisition regulations, whereas DFAR, it's defense federal acquisition. Now let's take a look at CMMC level 1. So this is level 1 is if you're handling federal contract information, FCI only. There's no CUI whatsoever. In this situation, every single one of those out of the box is good to go to meet the requirements. Again, this doesn't mean you are now CMMC level 1 compliant. It just means you can achieve CMMC compliance with any of the Microsoft universe of products. Now let's talk about what everybody is here for. CMMC level 2 and level 3. CMMC level 3 hasn't kicked in yet, right? There's almost no one with CMMC level 3 yet. So CMMC level 2 is the primary driver over here. So can you achieve CMMC level 2 or CUI protections, controlled unclassified information? The short answer is yes, it's possible. As you can see with the commercial version, you have to do some additional configurations and deployment of tools, but you can achieve it. Additionally, with the GCC and GCC High and self-hosted, you don't have to do those additional tool deployments. It will support it out of the box. But I'm going to touch on over here. I put this yes over here, because a CUI is an umbrella term. What falls under CUI? You can go look at the archive. I can include the link. The link is in the description. But CUI covers quite a lot. ITAR, EAR, and controlled defense information and many other categories fall under CUI. What you can see over here, what we have in the next line, ITAR, EAR, and no foreign hosting, which again, that goes back to US persons only, is controlled over here. So in other words, ITAR and EAR are CUI. Not all CUI is ITAR or EAR. Now, you can use Microsoft Commercial and GCC to achieve ITAR compliance. You're saying, but wait, Harut, this is it's using a global workforce, right? Does this mean that how am I going to achieve compliance when I have ITAR and there might be non-US persons who are dealing with this? This is the only place that has US persons only. You're right. You have to separate the information, and we'll talk about that in a minute, how to do that. But it is possible for you to stay with the system you have and still achieve ITAR EAR compliance. Now, I put this last line over here, DoD Cloud Computing Security Requirements Guide, SRG, impact levels. 99% of contractors don't have to worry about this. This is not an issue, right? This is, it's in a commercial, you can't do it. So let's kind of put that aside. Basically, if you are hosting systems for the DoD, and you're required to comply by the cloud compute equivalency of SRG. That's, by the way, Defense Department's more constrained, more higher requirements on top of the FedRAMP High. If you're dealing with that, then you cannot use commercial. There's nothing you can do about that. You have to go with GCC High or GCC, or if you have a system where you're running software, it has to be running on Azure Gov, or actually Azure DoD tenant as well. Why do I put this here? It's very few of you will be dealing with this. I hear these vendors talking about this, but again, it's like talking about, do I need a helmet? I'm going to use an analogy over here. Do I need a motorcycle helmet? Well, no, you don't, but you might ride a motorcycle one day. Well, if I do, then I'll worry about getting a helmet then. But you yourself most of you don't deal with this stuff. So it's best just to put it aside. Okay. All right. Now that we have answered the question, right? So what were the different products? How does it fit? I've kind of let the chicken out of the bag, the cat out of the bag. Is it the chicken, the cat? Who knows? The short answer is, do you need Microsoft GCC High for CMMC? The answer to that is no. You don't need GCC High for CMMC level 2 and 3 compliance. But there's a couple of gotchas you got to watch out for, okay? Microsoft GCC High is one of the many options you can use. Some of the gotchas you'll see out there, you'll see vendors keep insisting that you buy it, or else you will not be compliant. And to be fair to them, right, that's the tools they've learned. Microsoft is a great company, has a huge IT system supports third party. So many of them, that's kind of the only tool that they learn to use, not the thousands that are available in the marketplace, not the thousands that you're already using, but that's the only system they use, and they kind of go with blog posts from Richard, and they go with their opinion and their recommendations. But you don't have to. But keep in mind that those who sell Microsoft GCC High, those are the only tools they use. As the old saying goes, to hammer everything is a nail. So watch out for that. But you're not an IT vendor. You're actually a company that uses its own products, right? There's actually 200,000 IT solutions out there, actually 186,000 pieces of software that you can buy, plus open source that you can deploy. Now, we have already analyzed the most common 2,000 IT and security products that you're using today, try to map all of those requirements to see if they actually fit the CMMC requirements. Instead of forcing you to buy a product that we're comfortable with, we've analyzed those to say, what you're using already hits some of these requirements. So I want to give you an example right now. This is obviously, since we're already talking about Microsoft 365. So this is our analysis of Microsoft business standards. So we analyze 50 different attributes and we map it to CMMC, NIST 800-171, to ISO. We map it actually to HIPAA, FedRAMP, quite a few other requirements as well. Like, for example, identity and access management, single sign-on. we rate it. So our software with AI goes and evaluates Microsoft's business standard and gives it a score on a scale of 0 to 3, gives you confidence level, gives you its rationale and thinking about that, and sources. Then we can rate. Then we map this requirement to CMMC. There's quite a few other attributes. Multi-factor authentication. There is, zero trust. There is a role-based access control, attribute-based access control. So we evaluate every single one of this for about 2,000 products out there. Our goal is to do all 186,000 by end of 2026, but we're down the most popular ones that we have. So session management. So all data loss prevention, right? We will rank them and then we'll map it. So whatever you're using, whatever security tools, endpoint protection tools you're using, we evaluate those. And we then actually can tell you if they meet requirements or not, so instead of forcing things on you. All right, so let's take a look at this next. So again, CMMC is not required, but let's talk about what are the benefits of the GCC High and considering keeping what you have instead of having to switch over to something else. First, and the most obvious one is saving money. So our customers typically save 43 to 68%. This is not some hypothetical numbers. These are actual numbers. We have some customers who choose to go with GCC High, which is great. We have customers who are 100% on GCC High. We have customers who stay on whatever they're using, right? Microsoft Commercial. Maybe they're staying on Google Workspace or they even have GoDaddy Office 365, or they're on various different other systems, which we can help get you to compliance. But at the same time, right, we don't want you to not only spend money, but we also don't want you to have to really misplace all of your processes, right? Business continuity is a key driver. Aside from the hard dollar costs of having to migrate, you're changing your operational processes, which creates disruption, it creates risk and having to retrain your staff, or even worse yet, when you split your team, right? Do an enclave, some you migrate, and some you keep in the old systems. Now you have like 2 systems you have to manage. Third, and most importantly, in my humble opinion, is what I call the favorite child syndrome. So what does that mean? So if you take let's say you have 100 employees, only 5 of them deal with DoD contract. You say, all right, I'm going to create an enclave. I'm going to put you in this nice, special, warm, cozy place. I'm going to make it extra secure. I'm going to buy you expensive tools. I'm going to, maybe give you some cookies and snacks. Now, what happens that creates this favorite child or favorite employee syndrome? You have now 2 different environments. One of them is really secure, while the other one is less secure or maybe even not secure at all. Now, your teams have to manage 2 different processes. You have to have 2 different IT systems, right? Maybe it's not worth it to have 2 different systems. There are scenarios where an enclave is valuable, right? Having them separated could be impactful. But if you don't have to have an added cost, it might be more economically and operationally feasible if you just keep everybody in the same system instead of having to split them apart. All right, so we talked about it. We talked about you don't have to migrate, but let's talk about why you don't have to migrate and how to actually get compliant. So when we talk about Office 365 commercial, is it compliant or not? One of the key things we're talking about is really just email, right? We're also talking about email attachments and file storage, like in OneDrive or in SharePoint. But let's talk about how actually creating, transmitting, and storing CUI in email works, and we'll talk about how to protect it. So if you're in a commercial cloud, when you create an email as an email sender, that is stored in Microsoft Cloud Commercial, which is not compliant. And then you create an email that goes through POP3 or SMTP protocol. It ends up going all the way to the recipient, and then they store it in their email inbox or whatever folder they want, or even when they delete it, it's still persistent. Now, by the way, the email recipient, now they're part of your supply chain. They're a supplier or they're a client. They also have to achieve compliance. So we're not even talking about that. That's a separate conversation to be had. They have responsibility of protecting CUI or because they're part of the supply chain. It's a flow down requirements. All right. So this is a commercial, be it Office 365 commercial or be it Google Cloud or, as I mentioned, GoDaddy 365 hosting. It is not compliant. So how can you make this compliant? All right. So by drawing some magical orange boxes. So let's talk about what this is. So this means spinning up an environment either locally or on Azure Gov or on AWS Gov, or doesn't really matter, spinning up a storage place to actually store CUI. Now I'm showing kind of the schematic, right? So the storage in the email system is no longer being used, and the email itself is actually now just kind of a dot email, which says, hey, you have a protected secure email, click on a link to view it, which is kind of in this protected orange envelope over here, which is CMMC level 2 if you're hosting it, or FedRAMP compliant if it's in the cloud. Now, I'm not talking about, Prevail. You can use Prevail if you want, but there's many other ways. Again, as I said, we've analyzed over 2,000 tools. You can get to this isolation of your email to protect it without having to do this. For the user's perspective, their process doesn't change. As you can see from this screenshot, they're still drafting an email. It looks like they're doing it in the regular Outlook or even Google Workspace, but it's actually creating an email that is completely outside of that commercial. Okay, so now that we covered kind of the technical pieces, let's talk about the core objectives. There's really 3 of them when you're trying to hit CMMC level compliance without GCC High. The core tool, as we talked about, that you want to protect: email sending, attachments, and file storage. So because that's where you transmit, store, and process CUI. So by separating that, but then still making it visually appear that you're actually still using those things, still using Outlook or Google Workspace, still not affecting the workflows and processes, actually produces a much better outcome for the users. And it's also cheaper. Now, what platforms can we support? We found solutions, some of them free, some of them low cost, some of them you can install and manage yourselves. We'll work with Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, GoDaddy Office 365, including your self-hosted. If you happen to install the Exchange and you're running it, it will work with that as well. All right, so let's now, after viewing all this, you say, you know what, Harut, thank you, but no thank you. We still want to go with GCC High. A great option. That's part of achieving compliance with CMMC. It works. It might be simpler, but there's a couple of things you should know. If you're going to make that decision, there's a process you should follow to really get the best value for GCC High. First and foremost, you have to be verified. So there is the onboarding, the embark process. Microsoft sends you a URL where they confirm your cage codes and contracts and your website too, so you're actually working within this space, right? And you should even obtain this. Second, keep in mind, then you got to go purchase licenses. These licenses are sold by commodity. They're a commodity. There's the same price book by all resellers. You can only buy, unless you're like an enterprise with 5,000 plus employees, you can only buy GCC or GCC High licenses from resellers. They have the same price book, right? And what we notice a lot of times, they will tack on unnecessary items. So what we notice many times, because the margins are the same, the competition is fierce, they'll make up things like license provisioning, tenant maintenance, host transfer. So you start seeing things that are not truly Microsoft. But they're just add-ons trying for them to compete and make a couple of extra bucks. Now, if you want an honest quote, or if you've gotten a quote, if you're not sure the items are actually from Microsoft or they're just made up, contact us on the description, and we'll be happy to review it and tell you if this is a real quote. Actually, at least use us as a cannon fodder. We'd be happy to give you a quote which you can use to get maybe even a better pricing from GCC High from other vendors. So if you're not sure what you've gotten is accurate, we'd be happy to walk you through all of the SKUs and explain what's what, and if you really need it or if they're overselling it. So once you've gotten an accurate quote, the next thing you need to do is really kind of provision your tenant and then start migration and configuration process. Again, depends on what you've selected. If it's an enclave or a full migration, this could be a fairly drawn out process. There's a lot of gotchas. You can migrate using Microsoft systems on its own, or you can migrate using third-party tools. Now, if you want the checklist on how to do this, either deploying GCC High, or if you want like a detailed implementation plan, please check with us and we'll tell you how to do that. Now, by the way, follow and watch the next video, which is about the mistakes people make deploying CMMC. So the wrong way of doing CMMC and how to actually avoid a lot of the pitfalls. That's the next video. Watch it, or at least contact us, and we'll get you the accurate checklist, which is very specific to your organization only. All right, so let's talk about pricing. So Microsoft, I've hinted the prices significantly higher. but it's an undisclosed price, so we're not going to get into talk about the actual prices. But what I'm going to do a little bit of a kind of an average pricing comparison. Now, if you have bought $100 worth, so this is pricing is $100 worth of Microsoft 365 on commercial. Now, the apples to apples transfer. So if you bought the E3 or E5, Enterprise 3 or Enterprise 5 license, and you're moving over to GCC High, that is going to cost you $170 approximately, maybe a little bit more, a little less, depending on what license you do. Now, if you bought Microsoft Standard, or some of the very low cost plans that are only $4 or $5, that is not even an option, right? In GCC High, you have to go with E3 or the lowest now available. About a week ago, it's Business Premium, which is going to cost you 7 to 10 times more just to migrate. Now, is this fair? Is this the right pricing? Right, so we've done a lot of analysis. So we've been seeing a lot of data that I want to reveal to you today. We work with AWS, Google, and actually Microsoft Azure. We resell and implement a lot of this services, and we see a pattern that is actually concerning us. So if you look at this graph over here, you'll see what I'm talking about, right? One of this is not like the other. One of them is sticking out like a sore thumb. So let's talk about what I mean. So everybody has their own US sovereign cloud option. All of the big cloud providers, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, right? They all have their own equivalent, including Oracle. I'm not listing them over here because we don't resell them, but they're very, very similar. Microsoft has two offerings similar to Google, right? They have their Microsoft 365 and their Azure offering, and they have their own sister products. So Microsoft 365 has Microsoft 365 High, which is 70% higher or more. AWS has commercial and AWS Gov. The price difference between AWS and AWS Gov is only 13%. Microsoft's product, Azure and Azure Gov, they themselves are only anywhere from 7 to 9% difference. So it's a much lower bar between the two. Similarly with Google Workspace, actually Google Workspace or Google Cloud even, they're at parity. Sometimes the Google government is even lower because they're trying to win more business. Now, why am I showing you this? Because I am personally concerned. There is no substantial cost if you're at scale like this, this mega scalers like Microsoft, AWS, and Google. If you have a commercial environment to make it FedRAMP or US sovereign environment or whatever marketing language they're using, the costs are reasonably higher, but not that much, maybe 3%, 5%, 10%. Now, they're all kind of equivalent products over here. There's nothing about Microsoft 365 GCC High that is very different than like the, AWS Gov Cloud or Azure Gov Cloud or Google Workspace Gov US Sovereign. But for some reason, it is substantially higher. Why? So really, why is Microsoft GCC High so much higher? Is Microsoft ripping off small defense contractors? Are they ripping off the Defense Department? Are they overcharging them substantially with this kind of literally giving them this big finger sticking out? Now, this is my concern, my opinion. I don't know. I am not a financial analyst, but the numbers don't lie. They might be off here and there because they always are changing. But I want to understand, Satya, if you're listening to this, please reach out, right? Let me know why this is higher. I would like to tell my customers because they're wondering why they're having to pay so much more money. All right, so that's the last piece about the price concern and fairness. So aside from that, what else can we do? Now that you've kind of been educated on the choices between Microsoft, GCC High, or sticking with what you already have, be it commercial, be it Google Workspace, and so on and so forth, because those can achieve compliance. Those could have the minimal impact on your organization because ultimately those are where the hidden costs are. So what are the next steps? So if you like to have an assessment, as you probably saw in that insert video we did in this, reach out to us, right? So there's many ways to get to CMMC or CUR compliance. There's a very, very cost-effective ways. Likely what you have is already good enough. It just needs some configuration changes or maybe some add-ons. There's actually, as I mentioned, we've evaluated over 2,000 tools. Some of these tools are free and open source or even low cost. But I'm going to tell you a secret. The thing about free and open source tools or low cost tools is nobody's marketing to them. So a lot of times the products we end up buying are the ones with the best marketing, not necessarily the best product. So there are really incredible solutions out there that don't have the best marketing budgets. And we feel like it's our responsibility to democratize and get this in front of people so they can get them and save money. So there's ways to get to compliance without having to overspend. So what can you do? If you want to get a vendor neutral assessment which will take about 15 minutes, and get a detailed report of exactly if what you have is going to help you get to compliance. Please click on the link in the description and reach out to us. We can do a quick checkup and review what you have, or if you need a quote, kind of go up with other against some other vendors, GCC High vendors, and get a better pricing. Reach out to us. So thank you very much for your time. Looking forward to helping you more. Don't forget to hit subscribe and like or comment so we can get more great content like this to other people who will need them. Thank you so much.